Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and in this week's Weekend Essay Podcast, we have feature writer Amanda Newman Smith once again giving us a great weekend essay on speaking out about family estrangement. Take it away, Amanda.
Families are at the heart of financial planning, but I've heard from advisors that intergenerational financial planning in particular can involve navigating complicated family dynamics. This ranges from the reappearance of prodigal children when an elderly client falls ill, to clients feeling unable to trust younger generations with the family wealth. I used to listen to these accounts and marvel at how situations like this come about. How do you not see your daughter or elderly parent for 15 years? How do you get to the point where people think you're only interested in your parents' money when they're dying? Why are adult children treated like school children by parents who are preparing to pass on their wealth? From an early age, whatever our culture, we're taught about the importance of family life and the strong bonds it is supposed to create. But not everyone has great family relationships. A quirk of birth does not necessarily mean people have your best interests at heart or that you'll get on. Estrangement is not something people tend to talk about, perhaps because the concept of a family as an ideal is so ingrained in our society, but it's more common than you would think. I recently heard that someone my husband works with hasn't spoken to his mum in 25 years. Within days, I also heard that the mother of one of my childhood friends no longer speaks to her son and her sister. I don't know any of the details, so I don't judge. It just strikes me as so sad. According to Standalone, a charity that supports people who are estranged from their families, estrangement affects 1 in 5 families. It is estimated that over 5 million people in the UK have decided to cut contact with at least one family member. Marriage and divorce are common factors in family estrangement, as when parents divorce and remarry, this can affect relationships between parents and their children. The Standalone website also lists other reasons why this might happen. Lifestyle choices and gender choices, sexuality, disagreements over money, religious differences, some form of abuse, marrying someone from a different background, or not behaving to the satisfaction of core family members. It is sad when people who were once important to each other no longer have a relationship. So when an advisor recently told me how he had brought family members together and got them speaking for the first time in so many years, it was difficult not to see that as a marvellous achievement. That family went on to rebuild their relationship as a result of the advisor acting as mediator. But it's simplistic to view every estrangement in that light. Sometimes it happens for good reason, and it's better for that distance to be maintained. It's fair to say that I probably wouldn't have had that view had I not been touched by this issue myself and read about other people's experience of it. A member of my extended family died recently, and sadly I didn't attend the funeral. It was a tricky situation as I'm estranged from that part of the family. The deceased was a relative by marriage, and while I wouldn't say we were close, I'd known him since I was little, so hearing of his sudden death was upsetting. I remembered that he'd bought me my first ever bagel on the way to my first ever visit to the Tower of London. Even when I was an adult, he was there that first Christmas after my dad died, making sure Mum and I felt included at his family gathering. I thought about attending the funeral, but went with my gut feeling and stayed away. I paid my respects by sending a wreath for the deceased and a sympathy bouquet to the immediate family. Our estrangement came about indirectly, the fallout from a disagreement I had with a relative who is extremely close to that branch of the family. It would be unfair on this person to go into details, as they are obviously not able to give their side of events here. But what I can say is that I would never have predicted our relationship would become non-existent, not in a million years. In my naivety, I thought I was doing the decent thing in speaking directly to my relative about something that was bothering me, rather than bleating on about it to other people. It's how I prefer to be treated myself. I'd rather know what people genuinely think and feel so problems don't fester beneath the surface. I'd even go so far as to say it's why my husband and I have been together for 17 years. We prefer to get everything out in the open and deal with it. Okay, it's not pleasant to air your grievances, and I understand why some people shy away from it. But nobody can correct misunderstandings or resolve issues they don't know about. and these things don't go away just because you don't acknowledge them. I'd say it's more likely that if not addressed, they turn inwards and poison relationships through deep-seated resentment. I can probably trace my thinking on this back to the failed long-distance relationship I had years ago. The first inkling that my ex was unhappy was when I read a restaurant review he'd written for a local publication. Living elsewhere, I usually wouldn't have seen it, but I saw it online. Not only had I been relegated from girlfriend in a previous review to dining companion in this one, the review poked fun at me through my choice of meal. I saw through the surface humour to the barbed comments and felt hurt, as well as very stupid. Why hadn't I noticed his feelings towards me had changed? Since then, I've been a fan of being upfront. Saying what's on your mind and sorting it out from there just seems healthier and easier in the long run. With my relative, I'd assumed I'd say what I had to say, they'd say their piece, and we'd move on together. My mum and I have a close relationship which is built on that basis, but I'd failed to take on board that some people just don't like talking things through. It's not how they deal with life. For some, particularly older generations, silence really is golden, and what they see as speaking out of turn is distasteful, disrespectful even. My relatives stopped taking my calls, and after that initial spell where I thought, no, this really can't be happening. How is this happening? I had to accept things weren't going to pan out as I'd anticipated, even though I didn't understand it. People deal with relationships in different ways, but you can't fix things if someone withdraws from communication. So I gave up and left it, which is how it has stayed. It's not how I wanted it to be, but it is what it is. Getting married, having a family of my own and moving away from extended family to a different area has meant I'm not as close to some relatives as I once was, both physically and socially. That's just life. We're not immediate family. We all understood that we're busy with work and kids and have our own stuff to do, so it was never a problem. But after falling out with that relative, I realised it also meant I had no say in the family narrative around what had happened, hence the estrangement from my deceased relative and his family. It's human nature to take the side of whoever we're closest to, fill in the gaps in conversations we weren't a part of, and come to our own conclusions. I've done this myself, hearing from my son about unfair treatment by a teacher and going to the school to complain, only to find things weren't quite as I'd believed. It's a cliche, but the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, with rights and wrongs on both sides. Few of us admit that at the start, though. It usually comes about when we've all said our bit and are ready to sort things out. But if that moment never comes, you're stuck. There's just nowhere to go. My situation isn't as traumatic as estrangement between a parent and child. Not being in contact with certain people has removed the family politics from my life, and it's nice to be concerned only with what goes on in my own four walls. Even so, when it first happened, I was upset and ashamed to admit to friends that a chunk of my extended family won't speak to me anymore. I relied mainly on my husband for support this time, as it was awkward for other family members who wanted to remain on good terms with everyone. I felt that people would think I was a terrible person who had done something really awful, not just having one disagreement with one person. Apparently it's common for people who are estranged from family to keep quiet about it because they think others would judge them harshly. Because we're all conditioned to see family as sacrosanct, it's easy to fall into encouraging people who are estranged from family to just say sorry and make up, when it might not be a good thing for their mental health or physical safety. People who do this mean well, but every situation is different and you don't necessarily know everything about it. Many a time I've asked myself, should I have just ignored what had been bugging me and not upset the apple cart? I started to think that advanced age and lockdown probably contributed to the rift, so would the decent thing have been to have just let it wash over me? Having said that, being true to yourself and doing things the right way, however difficult, is something I've drummed into my kids. I lose respect for adults as soon as they expect youngsters to do what they say, but not as they do. So on balance, I think I'd have let myself down if I'd said nothing, or even worse, griped to other people. It's another cliche, but you can only be responsible for your own behaviour. How others respond is down to them. I have no idea if there'll be a reconciliation with my relatives further down the line. It looks unlikely, but being put in this position in the first place has taught me you can never say never. Would I appreciate a financial advisor trying to bring us together as part of a wealth transfer strategy? Probably not. I wouldn't want my return to the family fold to be linked to money, as having a financial motive would probably be the first accusation to be thrown around if our relationship broke down again. But as I said earlier, we're all different, and if financial advisors are able to bring long-lost families together like Cilla Black's Surprise Surprise used to do in the 80s, that's a pretty impressive day's work.
Thanks, Amanda, for another great weekend essay podcast. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.